Alright, so today we're going to be working on a 2009 Mitsubishi Galant. This customer has a very noisy starter, so it doesn't fail down on the road somewhere. We're going to go ahead and replace it now. To access this starter, we're going to be removing some of the air intake ducting to be able to get to it. So we're going to start off the repair. So we're dealing with electrical stuff, so we're going to be disconnecting the battery as the first step there. Alright, so to be able to access the starter, we're gonna have to remove this air box. So we're gonna be disconnecting. That's the mass airflow. We got another hose clamp. Alright, so the air box has a couple 10mm screws holding it. Alright, so we have those two bolts. We have one more post that we're going to slip out here. And that's just a peg. All right, on this starter here, there is a heat shield. We're dealing with the exhaust manifold, so there's a lot of heat. So we have a heat shield protecting the starter. So there's two bolts on this side of the heat shield and two bolts on this side of the heat shield, both 10mm. So we'll go ahead and we will get these two here first. All right, so we have these two removed. Now we're going to do the other two. All right, so here we have the other side of the shield. We have this bolt and this bolt, same 10mm. We're going to be removing these. All right, so now we have that shield loose. All right, so now we have our heat shield removed, the bolts removed. We're just going to slide it backwards just to expose the starter, and so you can see the wiring going back. Now we have two bolts on the front, so we have to move some stuff. This right here we want to remove. This is the vent tube for the transmission, just a breather. We have our lower radiator hose. We can just remove out of that clamp. What we're trying to get is down here. We have one starter bolt right here, and the other starter bolt is down here. So that's where our access will be. We'll go ahead and do the lower bolt. All right, so one of the things we have in the way to get the starter out, we have this, these are coolant lines. This goes to the transmission. This is kind of an oil cooler for the transmission from the coolant system of the engine. So we have two bolts on this side, two bolts on that side, and we should have this whole cooler moving around. So that'll give us access. All right, so now we have those 4 bolts, so we can have this move around a little bit. All right, so looks like this is a little tight. We're going to go ahead and remove the cooler out of the way. We're going to disconnect just this one line first. We're going to see if we can pick this up and just lay it off to the side. Our object is to get this heat shield off so we can free the movement of the starter up some. So we'll go ahead and take this clamp off. I'd much rather remove the tranny lines, trying to avoid opening the cooling system up. Okay, there was that heat shield and the 4 bolts. The starter sits behind it. All right, so I'm going to remove this wiring hold down here, just so once I get the starter in a different position, I can get to those. Wiring connections. It looks like the clamp is pretty brittle. A lot of heat right there. All right, so you want to push the starter, get the nose cone past, and then we can slowly work it out. All right, so now we have the starter. So this is the starter signal wire. There's a little tab on one side. We just push it in and so that's the starter solenoid wire. Now this wire here is the one for the battery. Okay, and there we have our starter removed. All right, so here we have a starter we got from Auto Parts Direct to You. Now we're going to go ahead and make sure that everything is the same. We look pretty good. All right, so we'll go ahead and install the starter. This one came with new bolts for the heat shield, but we have our other ones, our originals. All right, so we know the starter is going to lay in like this. So we know the wire came across. So we want to make sure we position the wiring the same way that we took it off. That way everything lays correctly. I'm going to push back our insulator. You can see we went right there. All right, so that was that. All right. And tighten it up. Then we had our starter solenoid wire. All right. So now we just want to back it, the starter back in. Okay. All right, so there we are. We'll go ahead and put the mounting bolts back in so we can get it back in position. So definitely this is a lot easier with the cooler removed. So that may be one of the first steps there. May make a lot of the removal a lot easier to go ahead and take that out of the way first. We have a wide variety of tools with different swivels and stuff, so not sure what kind of access you have to tools. So that's why we fought around it, but ultimately it was easier, and we had to. All right, so now we want to install the heat shield. Let's go ahead and slide it back in. Okay. I'll go ahead and put some. All right, so now we'll go ahead and put the cooler back into position. All right, so we'll go ahead and fasten the cooler down with our 4 mounting bolts. I always like to put all the bolts in finger tight, or at least in finger. That way everything lines up. All right, so now we want to hook up our training cooler lines. We had one in and one out. All right, so we have everything back to the way it was. All right, so now we're going to install the air box. So we had one fitting with a duct down here, just got to line that duct up. We had 2 bolts, and then we had just one with a pin. So we'll go ahead and slip this one in first for the pin, make sure we're lined up here, and then we should be lined up for the bolts with those 2. We'll go ahead, just go ahead and loosen up. Just want to get a little bit of movement there. Okay. All right. And we're there. Go ahead and put our 2 bolts back in. Okay, so now we have, this air filter is a little dirty. It's another something that we got from Auto Parts Direct U. We'll go ahead and install a new air filter. And so there we have our new air filter. Okay. All right, so this box has a clamp on the bottom, 2 clamps on top, but we're missing one. So make sure that we have these lined up, and we'll have the 1 clamp. That should be good enough. All right, so now I have everything installed. I just need to reconnect the battery, then test the system, make sure everything is good.